All right, let's get started then. Welcome everyone to the 2022 cycle application orientation for health professional schools. Just to let you know, this session is being recorded. It and the slides will be uploaded to our website at a later time. In addition, throughout the presentation, we will be stopping twice for question and answer, as well as at the end if we have time left. So just to let you know, we will be covering a lot of content in a short time tonight. So because you have access to the slides later, I'd rather have you just sitting back and listening tonight and trying to absorb everything. And then you can always go back and check for specific dates and that kind of thing afterwards. All right. So we also wanted to say we would much rather be doing this in person. This is a picture from 2 years ago at this exact event. You might see we had a special guest there as well, but we do hope everyone's well and off to a good start of the semester. I have tried to make this as entertaining as possible. I realize it's the end of a long day. I hear memes are quite the rage with college kids these days, so I've done my best. All right, so this is the agenda for tonight. We're going to begin with some basic housekeeping things, and then we're going to start at square zero, just introducing what some of the different application services are. We'll touch base on the 4 major application components, and then followed by our UConn specific letter packet and advising process. We will jump into our portfolio system as well, and then talk a little bit about what happens after you actually submit your application. There's really 2 overarching goals tonight. So first of all, we're going to introduce all the different systems and applications related to health professional schools, as well as the ways that we're here to support you throughout the process. In addition to that, though, we do hope that you use this presentation to really gauge if you do truly feel ready to apply to health professional schools this upcoming cycle. It is a big time and financial commitment applying to these schools. And so we just ultimately want you to be putting your best and strongest applicant foot forward when it is time to apply. Okay, diving right into housekeeping. So we're a very pet-friendly department here. I would like to share our pet policy. If a pet enters the camera frame of a presenter during our orientation, we will pause our discussion for an introduction to that pet and admiration by all. So these are a few of the pets you may or may not see tonight. Lexi's over on the left. She's also behind me here. Next to that, we have Salt, or Boo Boo Kitty. Next to that, we have Biscuits and Toast. And as you can see, they're actually future dentists in training. And lastly, we have Misty. In addition, I do want to acknowledge that Friday is Lunar New Year, and so a very happy early New Year to anyone who celebrates that. Okay, just to double make sure, if you are not currently subscribed to our emailing list for the pre-medical and pre-dental advising office, please, please, please get on that. We send out a weekly newsletter, and this is really how moving forward we will be sharing all of the application information and process information, as well as important dates. So if you have not already gotten on it, all you have to do is email premed_predental@uconn.edu. In addition, here's some of our basic contact information. I do want to let you know that we've been in the process of updating our website significantly, and so we have a lot of exciting new pages up there. There's a whole new section, for example, on the coursework page about depth, breadth, and rigor. In addition, a major exploration page, something about core competencies, as well as a lot of applicant data. Please follow us on Instagram if you don't already. We were laughing earlier because yes, we're normally based in the Row building on the 4th floor. However, we will be back there someday. All right, also just as a heads up, so this is really the biggest event of our spring workshop series. This past Monday, we did offer a letters of recommendation, who and how to ask workshop in tandem with OUR. Moving forward, we will have more workshops geared towards very specific elements of the application process. The Letters of Rec workshop was held in a different WebEx room. However, moving forward, all of them will be held in this same WebEx room we're in right now. Okay, so please mark your calendars. They're all going to be recorded as well. Oh, the football is because we always hold this event around the Super Bowl. And so I'm always not really paying attention to the Super Bowl. I'm always focused on this instead. But if you watched it, I hope you enjoyed it. In addition, we have our first event of our Chat with Alumni series kicking off this Thursday at 7 p.m. It's actually a pair of sisters who are each in 2 different osteopathic medical schools. So this is great timing because if you've been debating whether you want to apply to MD programs or DO programs or a mix of both, you can hear from them and get a little more insight into what osteopathic medicine is and what their current programs are like. We did have 3 of these events last semester. All 3 of those recordings are up on our website as well if you would like to check those out. In addition, I just want to make sure you're oriented to the fact that our office is one of the subunits in the overall enrichment programs department. So we operate together with other programs such as Honors, Individualized Major Program, OUR, National Scholarships, as well as University Scholar Program. So these are all programs that are designed to enrich and enhance your undergraduate education. And they're open to students of all majors and all UConn campuses. Next, we have had some staffing updates in the past year, so I just want to make sure you're aware of the most commonly seen faces and names around our Office of Pre-Professional Advising. Since I'm speaking, I'll introduce myself first. My name's Krista Rogers. I'm a program coordinator for enrichment programs, and I also do some pre-medical advising. I'm now going to ask the advisors who are joining us tonight to introduce themselves, and I guess let's just do it in the order that you're listed on the screen, please. So Erin, please.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Erin Saramboli. I am relatively new to the pre-professional advising team. I joined in May, so have not yet been in row building to my office yet, but I have so enjoyed getting to meet some of you over the past 9 months, and I look forward to working with you over your next application cycle. And my cats are the aspiring dentist, Biscuits, and Toast.
Dr. Sanford?
So good to see everybody. Glad you're back, back in classes, and I hope things are going well for everybody. So I've been, in the business for a number of years, at the medical school for many years as in the admissions role and student activities and student affairs, and kind of took a semi-retirement a few years ago. So have been out at the main campus helping out at the other end of the pipeline. So it's a great privilege, pleasure to serve you in any way I can.
Hello and good evening, Kalia Arrington. I am an advisor in the pre-med office, as well as the Rose Scholars Health Professions program. I am the parent of Salt, also known as Boo Boo Kitty, and I look forward to continuing to working with you students.
Hi everyone, my name is Emma. We're actually getting a sighting of my cat Misty right now. I recently graduated in May. I worked for the honors office at UConn for 3 years, and then the summer between my junior and senior year, I worked for pre-med in the 2020 application cycle, and I've been working mostly full-time for pre-med since I graduated in May. So if you've ever gotten an email from an Emma in the office, that's me. If you ever took Environmental Studies 1000 the past 2 years, I might have been your TA. So I'm excited to get to know all of you and looking forward to this.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm glad you all remembered your names. Okay, I do want to also mention we have 3 wonderful student workers, and we would not be able to do anything without them. They keep our office running day to day. So here we have Allison, Amari, and Manisha. And you can see their majors and information here. I told them that I was going to include the frowny face because 2 of them are about to graduate and we just really don't like it when they do that. So it's just nice for you to be able to put a face to the name as well if you receive an email from one of them. Thank you for all of your support, guys. Okay, now we're going to dive right into the meat of this. So I'm going to introduce 7 of the most common application services that you're going to hear and just kind of get familiar with the terminology, the names. As you're going to find out, the health professional schools really, really like acronyms. And so I'm going to go through these slides pretty fast. Again, you'll have access to all these links and information after the fact. So we're going to begin with MD schools, which train physicians in something called allopathic medicine. And if you're applying to MD schools, you're going to use an application service that's called AMCAS. Some of you might already be familiar with this. Maybe some of you are hearing it for the very first time, but the application service is kind of like an intermediary between you and the actual individual schools that you're applying to. A bit more on that later, but just know that if you're applying to MD schools, you're submitting an application through AMCAS. The applicant guide, by the way, is really comprehensive. It outlines every single part of the application for you. None of the information is a big surprise, so you can always check it out ahead of time. Now, AMCAS is one of the few application services that have already released their dates for this 2022 cycle at this point. So you can make a note of this, and I do want to just talk about this because AMCAS is a little different in the way that they operate. So this year, AMCAS has indicated that the primary application will open on May 3rd. That is the very first day that you'll have access to download, begin working on your application. Now, unlike the other application services for other types of schools, AMCAS actually makes everyone wait about a month before they can click submit. I think that's really great, actually, because that gives you time to, well, just really take your time and put forth your best, most reflective responses to all the questions. So beginning on May 27th is when you can actually click that submit button. Once you hit submit, your application is entered into a queue for verification. You'll hear that term a bit later too. Verification is when the application service, that intermediary, they are double checking the grades you input in your application against your official transcripts, as well as calculating their own versions of your GPA to calibrate it nationally. So depending on the point in the cycle when you click that submit button, the verification process can take anywhere from about 2 to 6 weeks. Generally speaking, it is better to try to submit on the earlier side because the health professional schools do operate on a rolling admissions basis. Now, AMCAS is also a bit unique because they will hold all applications regardless until this year. It's going to be June 25th is the very first day that AMCAS will send any verified applications to the schools themselves. So what does this mean? It means as long as you submit your primary application sometime, let's say early June, that factors in a few weeks for the verification process, then it will essentially just be sitting there for a little time. And if it's been verified by June 25th, it will be shipped out to the schools on June 25th. However, no schools will have any applicants' information until that June 25th date. Just to let you know, I mean, these dates are also a bit subject to change depending on COVID-related things. Last year or last cycle, as you can see in the middle there, they actually delayed the submission button date by about 2 weeks just to accommodate applicants whose testing patterns got interrupted and that kind of thing. Okay, in terms of fees, so they have not released information about the cost of applying yet. However, it's never more than $1 or $2 different from year to year. So these were the fees from last cycle, and eventually we'll be updating this when we have the newer fees. Please note there is a fee assistance program as well that you can apply for. It is currently open, accepting applications since 2 days ago. Yes, this is one of the reasons we do want you to be, we want you to feel incredibly well prepared when it's time to apply, just because it costs a lot to apply. Okay, so just to submit your application, that's $170. That includes one program. And then each additional school is $41. The average med school applicant applies to about 17 schools these days. We will have a workshop later on about how to select schools to apply to. Okay, I'm going to speed up a little now. To help you in your search for what schools you do want to apply to, we recommend that you subscribe to the MSAR tool. This is a database of all MD programs in the country, and they offer either a 1 or 2 year subscription, but it really breaks down any kind of data and fact and pre-medical experiences, matriculation data that you could ever hope for, including GPA and MCAT scores, medians, percentile rankings. So these are 2 screenshots from that tool for UConn Med specifically, to give you a sense of some of the numbers. Okay, now moving along to DO schools. So there are currently 37 DO programs in the country, but DO students account for 25% of all students in medical school now. And so if you're going to be applying to DO schools, your application service is called AACOMAS. AACOMAS. They have not yet released their 2022 cycle dates. However, they're generally no more than a day or 2 different. And so you can make a rough estimate. It's going to be sometime that first week of May, most likely. Okay, they don't have that intermediate step where they make everyone wait to click the submit button. So it's pretty much as soon as you finish your application, you just click submit, and then your application's entered into the queue for verification. Okay, we also don't have their updated fees yet. However, this is what it was last cycle. Similarly, there is a fee waiver program through them as well. The DO programs have their own searchable database. It's called the Choose DO Explorer, and it's free, which is wonderful. In addition, they do have a student guide as well that you can check out to help you through the process. Okay, moving on to dental schools. If you're going to be applying to dental school, your primary application service is called ADSAS. That's just kind of fun to say, ADSAS. And so ADSAS also has released their dates for this cycle already. So you can mark your calendars already. It's going to open on May 11th this year to begin filling out. You can also submit ADSAS as soon as you're ready, as soon as you feel you've completed it. Oh, no, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. So you can submit beginning on June 1st. However, this is subject to change. Just as a heads up, last cycle, they delayed it until June 16th, again, because of COVID-related things. So just always important to keep an eye on the official messaging. Okay, we do not have the application fees yet. However, they are significantly steep for applying to dental school. So they'll likely be something similar to this. And there is an ADSAS fee assistance program as well. The Dental School Explorer is a really great tool. That's the database of all the dental programs in the country where you can look up the stats and their mission statements and all that kind of thing. There is a guide to dental schools as well, or you can purchase a bundle. Okay, quick note. So Texas medical and dental schools, they're a little bit special. They use their own application service, not part of AMCAS or AACOMAS or ADSAS. So if you will be applying to any of the state schools, and I actually just read that Baylor School of Medicine will be moving to them this cycle, you will have to apply and submit a completely separate primary application through TMD SAS. We do not have their dates yet. However, generally they keep it pretty consistent at May 1st and June 1st. The one nice thing about them is it's just one flat fee. So no matter how many of the individual programs you're applying to, you just submit that one flat fee. Okay, briefly, occasionally we have applicants who are applying to PA programs in addition to medical school. If that is the case for you, then you'll be submitting a primary application through CASPA. We don't have the date yet either. However, last cycle it opened on April 30th. So generally it is the last week of April, about a week earlier than the medical school applications. These were the fees last year as well. There is a fee assistance program. And they do have their own program directory that's free to use and search. We do always have a few optometry applicants every cycle. And so if you'll be applying to that, the centralized application service is known as OptumCAS. One thing to note is that OptumCAS does open a bit later than the others, so it doesn't actually open until usually late June. Okay, and those were the fees. They do have a searchable directory as well. I believe there are 23 optometry programs in the country at the moment. Also podiatry, so if you'll be applying through them, then you have AAC PMAS is your primary service, and they open even later. They typically open in late July. Okay, and there's their database. Okay, this is just a summary of some of the contact information for you to reach out to them down the road if you need to. Okay, I know I've been cruising through this, so let's take a quick mental break with some cute animals, and let's open it up for some Q&A. So Erin, could I ask for your help in addressing any of the questions in the chat, please?
We do not have any questions in the chat right now. I did share the link to the AAMC fee waiver program because it does allow for reduced MCAT costs and can cover many of application costs for those who qualify. Does the fee assistance program cover only primary apps? Do you know that answer, Krista?
I believe it does help with secondaries as well, and you also get complimentary access to the MSAR tool, which is very nice.
Yeah, many of the professional schools just accept that fee waiver to cover secondary fees. It's just something to keep in mind to keep the costs down.
Krista, somebody had asked about Canadian med schools and international med schools. Do you have any insight onto that process, or is that better shared kind of on a one-on-one basis?
Many Canadian programs actually do use AMCAS as their primary application service, which is very convenient. Some of the other international schools, though, they have their own separate applications, so you might have to submit individual ones for those. And the Canadian program should be listed in the MSAR tool as well.
Yes, I would just add that it's really difficult to get into Canadian schools. That countries really target mostly their own residents. If you happen to have dual citizenship, that puts you in a little bit different scenario. And we've certainly had students at the school, applying to some Canadian schools in the past. With respect to international schools, there's a whole slew of them, of course, around the country. A lot of attention gets paid to these Caribbean schools. General rule of thumb, we tend to counsel people to try to give their application enhancements through at least 2, sometimes 3 applications. And the international direction is often available for folks, but there is some risk involved, essentially related to eventually getting back into the U.S. So we tend to be on the cautious side to try to get your candidacy to a point where you will get schools in the U.S. every possible opportunity, before you turn to international schools. They're very aggressive about sort of going after applicants as well, and have some incentive programs that they typically make available to you. So, again, I think the sort of overall thrust is we tend to advise folks to try to get your candidacy into a place where you're competitive for U.S. schools. Give it a couple of tries. If being a physician is the only thing you've ever wanted to be, and you're not hearing favorably from schools, in the United States, then sometimes students do turn to international schools. I have visited a number of these over the years and can tell you they have pretty impressive facilities for the most part. And a lot of them you do 2 years there, and then you come back and you do your other 2 years in the United States. And they have all kinds of contracts with different hospitals in different states throughout the United States. So, but it's really, as touched on by Erin and Krista, it's good to sort of explore your United States options, first, and make enhancements on your candidacy, and best to sort of do that individually as we move on and you move on in the application process.
Krista, I'll give you one more question that just came up in terms of applying to MD, PhD programs and MD programs at the same time in the same cycle. And can you do it at the same school in the same cycle?
Usually you'll have to indicate one or the other and send formal communication indicating as such. Dr. Sanford, though, would you like to clarify?
Yeah, you have to be a little careful with this. Some schools really treat them as separate applications. In general, what you do is go ahead and just follow the instructions that the specific school gives you. I always advise a student that if they apply to MD, PhD, just make sure you check if there is an option to have the file be processed over to the MD track only review. Connecticut, for example, they will do that only if you ask them to do it. So the file goes immediately to the MD PhD group. And if you end up sort of lingering on their list for a long time, it never sort of gets back over to the MD cycle. So it's just something to be careful, and you're going to have to basically follow up school by school because there's a lot of differences and nuances in how they operate.
Great, thank you. I guess we'll keep moving then in the meantime. So on to the next section, application components. So when we talk about applying to medical or dental school, you're really going to be submitting 4 major application components. So there's the primary application, the secondary application, testing scores, and letters of recommendation. So we're going to talk briefly about each of these 4 things, and you can find more information about each of them at that link on our website. I hope I'm doing good with the memes here. Okay, another really important thing to be aware of, because this causes a lot of confusion every year. First of all, a school does not typically touch any part of your application until all 4 components are received. Meaning, even if 3 of them have been received several weeks ago and they're still waiting on 1, typically the committee will not touch anything to do with the application until they have all 4 of them. Okay, so that's why it's a little, you want to be a little strategic about trying to submit everything so that you're not just waiting or hanging on one of them alone. In addition, our submission of your letter packet is completely independent of your submission of the primary, secondary applications, as well as testing scores. I'm not sure why, but every year we have applicants who are under the impression you can't submit your primary until we submit your letters. That is not the case at all. Again, schools won't touch your application until they have all of them. However, there's nothing stopping you from submitting your primary as soon as you're ready. Okay, so please remember this key point. In addition, actually, before jumping into each of the 4, we do want to talk a little bit about holistic admissions, because this is it has particular emphasis right now in the pandemic. And so, Dr. Sanford, would you like to introduce holistic admissions a little bit?
Sure, thanks. When I was doing admissions at the medical school for a number of years, we had a review process that had a sort of algorithm-based approach to evaluating applicants, for virtually every category, and we were able to eventually end up rank ordering virtually every applicant that applied by this standard, protocol and algorithm. And over the years, we got pretty discontent with doing only that, because it really didn't allow us to take sort of special care and attention for individuals that had very unique kind of scenarios. So we developed these sort of overscale categories to compensate for these areas, which basically amounts to holistic admissions review in the language that's used today. It really is special attention to anything about a candidate's background in upbringing and disadvantages they may have faced, individual sort of difficult personal circumstances that may have had a very, serious effect on, one's performance and one's prospects, one's, projects and things that they were involved with. Examples, the need to work full-time, for example, to support yourself through school. Maybe, English is not a first language, and, test scores sometimes are, as a group population, much lower there. So it's really attention, to more personal aspects of a candidate's, background and preparation, and just enrichments that they have been able to pursue given what their circumstances have been the sort of main things that characterize a holistic look. So rather than, a hard and fast formula that your grades are worth 60%, your MCAT's worth 30%, this clinical experience is worth 5%, this is worth 10%. It really takes a broader look at that and doesn't assign necessarily any, particular, weighting, to any given area. You'll see in the slide that's on your application components, just gives you a sense of what your odds are of gaining a spot in a school given a combination MCAT GPA. So, what's telling about this chart that they use to verify that schools are indeed utilizing holistic mission review is even people in the top category where you think they maybe have a shoe-in, to getting into medical school. It's not 100%. There are folks there with 4.0s and 98 percentile MCATs that sometimes are not admitted, and it may well be because they don't have the other elements that they're looking for, or somebody does not interview well. So, schools want to see strength in basically everything, and they, certainly, give careful attention to every aspect of an application. The flip side of that, as you look at this chart a little bit more thoroughly, you're going to see some folks, down in sort of B plus B range that you think, wow, gee, do they have a chance at all applying, given their particular set of MCAT GPAs. And you see instances where people, have been admitted with what might seem to be pretty modest, scores. So, they often use this chart as evidence that schools are indeed applying a more holistic approach to looking at you, your background, your opportunities, your enrichments, the strength of your motivation, and other sort of more fine-tuned aspects of your candidacy beyond just whether or not you have this or you have that. It's really more of an attempt to fully appreciate your circumstances and appreciate how far you've come. So, I think those are the things that sort of best characterize it. Over the years, we tried to get MCAS to do a little better job with this chart, frankly, because sometimes it gets to be misleading. There's a lot of students in those sort of a little bit more modest GPA MCAT ranges that have really done other things. So, to look at a chart just on the basis of your undergraduate GPA in your MCAT often just doesn't give a very complete story at all about, successes students have had beyond the undergraduate degree. So, again, so I think this chart does give you evidence of that. I just wish there were a way to sort of further refine what else did most of those students in those groups do, to essentially make them be more attractive to schools. So those are some of my comments related to holistic, and would encourage other folks to comment as well.
Dr. Sanford, we did have one question that came up, and that is related to this, which is thinking about non-undergraduate coursework. Maybe if somebody got a master's or something in the way, does that kind of go in that bucket of holistic admissions and it's another factor in this? How would you approach that in this process?
Yeah, I think the general sort of approach we've taken in the past is, beyond the undergraduate level, there are certain choices you could make about how to enhance your application. So in my mind, these boil down to four basic pathways, packages. One is a academic enhancement pathway. So this can be done through post-baccalaureate programs. It can be done through medical master's programs. It can be done, through targeted discipline-oriented science master's programs as a way to show further strength in the sciences. Each of those is sort of figured differently. Post-baccalaureate program records are included in the cumulative undergraduate GPA, so it does represent a way for you to influence your undergraduate GPA. Master's programs, whether they're medical master's programs at the private medical schools or they're discipline-oriented masters, are included as an entirely separate GPA and does not impact your undergraduate GPA. So the reason that's important is a lot of schools, when they do searches on applicants they're interested in, often they'll just use some undergraduate raw GPAs to do an initial cut on a list of folks to look for. So you may have, may just miss that, by 1/100th of a point or something in GPA. And even if you've had really, stellar additional work in other graduate programs, whether it's medical masters or discipline, sometimes it doesn't get quite the attention it does because they agree up front at that particular school that they're going to give a lot more credit just to the overall undergraduate record. But, bottom line, the schools do have all of that information on you. Some are kind of primed to be on the lookout for it. The model we used when I was doing admissions at the medical school, we looked at that situation individually for each person. And if there was a very dramatic, turnaround in terms of performance, we ended up discounting a bit the undergraduate record and ended up sort of weighting more heavily the most recent record that was much stronger. So for example, if somebody had a B average with 130 credits as an undergraduate, and they went on to do a master's plus program of 30, 40 credits or post-bac of the same ilk, we would often adjust the GPA to have the total undergraduate experience count for maybe 2/3 or even as low as 1/2, and have the most recent program that's a lot stronger count for at least 1/3 and sometimes up to 1/2. So individual schools approach this in different ways, but the bottom line is an academic pathway approach is often kind of a strategic move for a student to really put themselves in a little bit better position, in terms of just comparison of academic records, and different schools operate them. Other pathways include things like a focused research program activity. Others, you may be a little shy in terms of clinical experience. So there are clinical experiential things that are expected over the course of a year or two. Sometimes the lack is service. So service pathways is another sort of key category to think about. And, sometimes applicants get a once in a lifetime offer to do something that they're never really going to be able to do again. So an example I like to talk about is we had a guy who was from Yale. One year he applied. When he was graduating, he happened to play football, and he got an offer to play for the Miami Dolphins the year after he graduated. So it's hard to turn up playing for the Miami Dolphins for a year after you complete college. So he actually went off to take advantage of that opportunity, and then eventually, came back. Actually won the Super Bowl that year. He got to play a couple of plays in the Super Bowl that year. But there are some unique circumstances. Sometimes, it could be Wall Street, it could be this, that, or the other thing. that would represents a unique pathway. Anyway, to answer the question, different approaches get taken. It's a good idea to sort of get a sense of where you are and, ask yourself that question, am I ready to apply now? Or are there some other things strategically, it might be better for me, to think about pursuing than applying right away.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Krista, one quick question for you. Is there a similar chart for this for dental schools and other schools that we could provide to students when we talk to them?
There is. The dental school ones, it's a very complicated, complex Excel document with a million tabs at the bottom, but that's something that we can send out through our newsletter in the near future.
Great. And just one additional point before Krista jumps right back in. If you're sending questions, please send them to everyone, only because we might be missing some in the private ones. And so just to make sure they're covered. And a few of them that have been sent to me, I will try to catch later, but feel free to send them to everybody unless we're just worried that we'll get lost in the mix. So go ahead, Krista.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Sanford, for your insight from being on an actual admissions committee. Okay, I have my assistant here now too. So when we talk about the holistic admissions, we're focusing on academic metrics, experiential components, and personal attributes. And talking about those latter ones, if you haven't thought about the core competencies for a while, this is a very good time to refresh your memory. So the 15 areas are listed right here on the page, and you can go read more detailed descriptions of them on the website, as well as read examples of how current medical students have demonstrated those. And so, just as one example of teamwork, for why teamwork is important, you never want this to happen. Oh, hello. Okay. So now diving into each of them, the primary application component, that is essentially the common app for each type of school. I think of it like the common app. That's probably the easiest way to think of it. For AMCAS, that includes 9 standard pages, which you can see listed on this screen. I'm just going to demonstrate a couple of them. So this is the coursework page. This is where you input all of the coursework you've ever taken. It probably is the biggest headache-inducing page just because you have to choose very specific codes and things. Next, we have work activities. This is kind of like a resume page, except you don't actually upload a resume. Instead, you enter each experience in its own little text bubble. In addition, you can only enter up to 15 experiences on the AMCAS application. That's not a lot. So that includes any kind of clinical, research, service, extracurricular type activities. You want to really think carefully about which of those are most meaningful in your background and include those. So ideally, things that you've been doing on a regular basis over an extended time, things you've really dedicated yourself towards. The application also allows you to enter up to 3 of them optionally as your most meaningful, and then have a slightly longer forum to describe why they're most meaningful to you. I believe the ADSAS application actually lets you pick up to 6 of them as your most meaningful. Okay, the personal statements prompts, or in AMCAS, they actually call it the personal comments essay. It's not a surprise what the prompt is, so this is why you can begin working on your personal statement really at any time. Some of the guiding questions, though, are on the screen. It's essentially, what is your motivation to be a physician? And on similar grounds, on ADSAS, their instructions are basically one line: explain your motivation, why you want to be a dentist. Okay. So I talked about this a little bit earlier, actually, but this is just a flow chart demonstrating how that verification process works. So again, you submit your application, and this is an example for AMCAS, but this is relevant to any of the application services too. You submit it, it gets verified, and then it gets actually shipped out to the individual schools you're applying to. So one of those 9 pages, for example, on the AMCAS application is where you list the individual programs you're applying to, and that's how AMCAS knows where to send your application. You can go back in and add schools after you've submitted it too. That page remains open indefinitely. The official website is also pretty good about providing status updates where they are in the queue. So every single day you can check back and they'll have a little updated blurb in the upper right corner telling you which they're processing applications that were received on so and so date, as well as transcripts that were received on so and so date. This is just a visual showing typical timing of how fast verification takes. So you can see if you submit your primary application in June, it's relatively quick, but once we get into the midpoint of the cycle, a bit later, July, August, it can take much, much longer. So ideally, you will be submitting fairly early. One really important thing for any of our dental applicants, ADSAS verifies applications very, very quickly. Every single year, Dr. Abbott and I are very surprised. We're getting our applicants' applications are being verified within 3 days, typically, if they submit right at the beginning of the cycle. So it's to your advantage if you're able to complete and submit that primary well early on. Okay, so enough about the primary application or the Common App, remember. What's the deal with that secondary application? All right, so secondaries, you can kind of think of them like supplementals for each individual school. Remember back to when you were applying for undergrad and you had to submit all those supplemental essays, typically school specific, at least one question asking you, why our program, why are you a good fit? So you'll be hearing more about these at our workshop in March geared towards secondaries, but for now, just be aware that there's something you will have to submit after you submit your primary application. The majority of programs do have them. Majority of programs will also automatically send you a secondary. It's not, they don't typically do a screening of your primary first. It's just they send you a secondary based on the fact you submitted a primary. The downside, they do involve additional fees as well. So they range, it can be anywhere depending on the program from about $30 to over $100 per program. You might hear about something called the Casper exam later. This is it's kind of a side test to test your critical thinking skills. Some programs use it as their secondary. Some programs use it as a supplement to their secondary. We will cover that more at a later point too. The one nice thing about secondaries is that the questions don't usually change year to year. So one thing we'll be telling you later on in the semester is you can look these up online and have a fairly good chance that the questions are going to be the same and just get a head start on them. And that way, if you happen to receive a lot of them at the same time, you're going to be really prepared and you can submit them in a very timely manner. Ideally, you do want to get them submitted within a few days. We just recommend you take no longer than 2 weeks for any of them. Some schools do use your response time to gauge your interest in them, so it's a little bit tricky. Okay, next on to testing components. I'm sorry, this might be a little bit mean. So the MCAT, I think most of you are pretty familiar if you're going to be applying to medical schools by now with the MCAT. It's a physical and mental marathon. The essentials for the testing year 2021 is available, so you can check that out, read all about it. Testing accommodations are possible. If that's something that you think you would qualify for, we do encourage you to begin that process very early. It takes a few months usually and does require a significant amount of paperwork. Okay, also, there's a really great guide through the AAMC about how to create a study plan. And so they give you a sample map and then also a blank template for yourself. This year, MCAT offerings are a little bit funky because of the pandemic. So registration for April through June dates is going to open on February 17th and 18th, and it depends on the testing location. If you are planning to take the test somewhere in Connecticut, your registration will open on the 17th at noon. Okay, so more information on the website. Registration for July through September dates will open a bit later in May. And then the good thing is they do have a very flexible rescheduling and cancellation policy at the moment because of the pandemic. Okay, this is a key piece of advice. We strongly recommend that you take the MCAT no later than mid to late July, mainly for timing reasons. So when you sit for the exam, you typically get your scores back 30 days after. Because the schools operate on a rolling admissions basis, and because we want you to stay as competitive as possible time-wise, purely from a time perspective, If you're getting your scores back any later than August, really, remember the schools are also waiting till they have your scores to do review of any part of your application. And so that's why we just recommend mid to late July. Now, this was a little bit different last year because of the pandemic and a variety of MCAT cancellations. Some schools did actually proceed with applicant review without MCAT scores, and then they just followed up down the road. The schools haven't really indicated they're planning to do that again. So I would, unless we hear otherwise, still try to plan on taking it no later than mid to late July. Okay, and I think I said this earlier, so you can submit your primary application before you've even sat for the MCAT. They're independent variables. This is just a little bit of information about retaking the test. This is the calendar for this year. Again, all tentative, it depends on the pandemic. So you can see also that only very specific dates per month, with the exception of February, are offered. Okay, and then these are the scheduling and the fee assistance program fees. Essentially, the earlier you register, the less expensive it will be. Okay, I don't want to dive too much into scores right now. However, just one thing to note is that a lot of programs are looking that you've scored a minimum 50th percentile in each of the 4 subsections of the MCAT. So generally speaking, we recommend aiming for minimum 125 because you do want to demonstrate a good balance between them. It could potentially be a red flag if your 4 subsections are like this. Okay, now a few words about the DAT. So the DAT 2021 guide is available as well. You can check that out. They also have testing accommodations possible. And then these are the fees associated with it. They've vastly reduced their rescheduling fees during the pandemic, which is kind of nice. And then lastly, if we do have any optometry applicants, the OAT guide is up. And very similar to the DAT, they're offered kind of through the same company. And the DAT and the OAT, by the way, you can take pretty much whenever you want because you just go to a specified testing location. It's not like the MCAT where the date is very strictly defined.
Krista, may I add a quick word about the MCAT?
Yes.
With the MCAT, it's important to know that it's not like the SAT and ACT where you get to choose which schools see your scores or if you even send them to schools. So, if you take it once and don't do as well as you'd like, or if you take it a second time, schools will see how you did both times. And so I'm thinking about this importantly in the context of accommodations. If you do get accommodations right now for a disability at UConn, it's probably best to go ahead and do the work to get the accommodations for the MCAT so you can put your best foot forward when you take it. And so that schools don't have to ask questions as to why you did what you did or why you didn't do well the first time and maybe you got your accommodations your second time. So just a word that they do see all of your scores. And then there's a question, do we have to send MCAT scores to each school?
So if you're applying to MD programs, your scores are automatically sent. You don't need to do anything. If you're applying to DO programs, you will have to manually go in and into your AAMC account and request that they be sent. Thank you, Erin. Really important point as well. Okay, next, let's talk about individual letters of recommendation. So very conveniently, we just had a workshop about them on Monday, who and how to ask. The recording is up on our website now, so please check that out. All kinds of great information. I do have 2 links here on the slide too about how to choose letter writers and then guidelines that your letter writers can refer to when drafting their letter. And that link is actually sent to them in a notification they receive when you request a letter through our system. Now, in terms of who you should consider asking for your individual letters of recommendation, Dr. Sanford, would you like to jump in and give a little explanation?
Sure. Standards differ a little bit, school to school, and things have changed over time. But I think you want to look certainly for 2 science letters. You want to, if you've been involved in research, try to get one from your research PI. If that's in science, that can count as one of the science letters. You know, schools like to see a letter from a health provider that you've worked with. It's best to sort of get it from the type of program that you're interested in applying to. You know, if it's an osteopathic school, they do like to see that you've spent some time with an osteopathic physician. It's an MD school, you know, best to get one from an MD as well, although they tend to, you know, not care as much and like, you know, to see whatever experience you've had. If it's PA, they do put a lot of premium on you having spent some time, you know, understanding and appreciating the difference in different provider roles. So, you know, just use your common sense, try to spend some time and cultivate a letter from people that you've spent time with in the area that you're, you know, particularly interested in applying to. But at least one clinical letter, you know, research letter, a science letter, you know, often is a good idea to try to get a, you know, a humanities or social science letter. This differs by some schools in terms of how much they value it. Also, it's a good idea to get a letter that really speaks to your service orientation. So this might well be from somebody that's gotten to know you very well over a period of time, through your involvement in different clubs on campus, things that you maybe reached leadership roles in, and they can, you know, talk about some of these core competency elements that you found listed before, just in the context of what you brought to your special interests. So a good cross section of people basically is, I think, the sort of approach to take into that. You know, schools are getting a little, you know, finicky about how many, you know, letters and all this kind of stuff. I mean, this has been going on for decades and stuff these days. But, you know, you really need to think in terms of cultivating a few key letters from people that will give schools a good sort of cross section of your involvement and strengths across the board. You know, so yeah, that's usually what I would advise a student to be thinking about as they move along. It's a little harder in a larger school just because you know, you may not have had as much opportunity to connect individually with people compared to, you know, smaller liberal arts colleges, you know, where there might be 30, you know, students or 50 students applying to medical school from that school. So it is something to be thinking about and trying to cultivate, you know, as early as you can. A lot of this faculty, you know, in MCB and PMB, you know, end up writing a slew of letters for people, and you know, they have their limits too. So it's a good idea to, again, try to cultivate a relationship, work on that a little bit. So when it comes time to ask, you know, they'll be in a position to, because they know you through courses you've taken with them, maybe through other connections you've had through research interests or just clubs that they've been involved with as well, and just know of your contributions academically. They know of your contributions in terms of individual scholarship, and they know your contributions to the university community and university culture. So, you know, give some careful thought to that. When do you ask? You know, at this time of year, if we're thinking about the 2022 cycle, I usually tell people to at least contact folks now and, you know, see if you can get on their radar list to agree to write a letter for you. If you wait too long to ask, sometimes people just run up against, you know, if they have to write 75 letters, you know, it's going to be some time before they're able to really get to it. And sometimes they have to decline to write it just because they've already agreed to write so many. So it's a good idea at this time of year, if you basically know who you want to ask, you know, to sort of plant a seed at least and get that rolling if you're going to be a 2022 applicant.
Krista,
I encourage others to comment.
Krista, I have a couple quick questions for you. engineering faculty and pathobiology faculty, would those both count as science? What do you think?
So I was anticipating these questions. We get them every year. I will actually let Dr. Sanford respond to that. Typically by science faculty though, we do really emphasize obtaining one letter at the very least from straight out biology, chemistry, physics faculty. If you are an engineering major, absolutely get 2 engineering letters though, because it makes sense. They're the people you know the best. Pathobiology, I would say that likely counts as science. Allied health sciences is the other one that's always a little bit of a gray area. It really depends on the specific content of the class that's being taught. Dr. Sanford, will you add?
Yeah, I would just reinforce what you both said here. The bottom line is you need to be cultivating relationships with people in your major. They're the ones who are going to really know you best, that you've had the most interaction with over time. And it's, quite ordinary and expected that you have, bottom line minimum of 1 at least from your major. And generally it's 2. And there are these, areas, even like psych, for example. There's a lot of really hard science psych classes that, could also classify. It depends exactly what the class is and how much hard sciences is part of the class. So there's some gray areas there where it can count as described. So, again, good to be cultivating, relationships that with some faculty that you've enjoyed their classes, you've maybe been involved in, working on their same areas of research that they've been excited in. Maybe you're connected with them through different clubs or other activities on campus. So we just want to emphasize that we know it's a little harder in a bigger school, but it is important to make sure you spend some time to cultivate those connections.
I'm going to give a few more quick questions for Krista and maybe Dr. Sanford before we jump on for here. And I will stress that there will be so many other opportunities to talk one-on-one with us about letters of recommendation and who the best set of recommenders is for you in the future. But 2 quick questions. One is, Krista, can you talk a little more about character references and who the best people would be for those? And then the second one was about, can you use an advisor as a non-science faculty letter of recommendation, or would you maybe put that more in the character reference side of things?
Yeah, bridging off that one first. So an advisor, if they're a staff advisor, that would likely be viewed as a character reference. If they're a faculty advisor, so typically someone with a PhD, someone with professor in their title, either assistant, associate, or just professor, that would likely be viewed as a non-science faculty letter. And so regarding the character reference, that's typically someone who knows you in a supervisory type role. And they can really comment on things like your professionalism or a couple of those core competency areas and just you as a person, what makes you special and what your special strengths are. So typical examples would be a part-time job supervisor, could be a student org advisor, it could be an athletic coach, someone like that.
Great. And for those of you who haven't already seen it, we want to remind you, we do have a whole recording on letters of recommendation, and there are some questions addressed in there about asking folks during a pandemic for letters of rec and approaches to that in there. And absolutely reach out to us with email. You can email us questions and we can get back to you as soon as we can.
So I just wanted to share a couple highlights from that letters of rec workshop Erin referenced. First of all, I cannot emphasize how important it is to ask people who know you well. Not just people whose courses you got a good grade in, but people who can speak to you and your individual strengths and give specific examples of seeing you in action in whatever context they know you. For example, I have seen letters for our medical and dental applicants that simply state, so-and-so got an A in my class, please contact me for further information. That is not going to add anything to your file if you really don't know them and they can't give that specific info. On the other hand, I've seen letters from faculty who An applicant maybe struggled a bit, especially at the beginning, but they got to know the professor very well. They made a consistent effort to go to office hours, identify strategies for success, and just worked really hard. And, you know, those kinds of letters provide so much more information about the applicant's competency areas and skills like the resilience and adaptability, for example. So just think about that really carefully. Also, never assume someone will write. Please always send an email message first, or you know, meet them in person to talk it over. Don't just send them an automatic request. And lastly, oftentimes letter writers, especially science faculty here, they will want a copy of your resume and or a draft of your personal statement just to get to know what your professional goals are a little bit better and your relevant experiences. So more on all this in that Letters of Rec workshop recording. Okay, just to mention as well, we really want to emphasize this. Some of the faculty, especially at UConn, write dozens and dozens of letters per year. And if you've ever written a letter of rec, it's not the kind of thing you just sit down and churn out in one go. Oftentimes you come back to it, you reflect on it, you sleep on it. So please make sure to thank them for their time and for supporting your candidacy. And keep them updated. I've talked to a lot of faculty who just never hear back about anything. And regardless of the results of your application, they'll be there to either celebrate with you and or provide further guidance and maybe identify strategies for success the next time. Okay, this is one of our favorite topics. The health professional schools have gotten incredibly finicky the last few years about letter of rec formatting. So we strongly recommend, let's just say require your individual letters of rec to be dated on letterhead, which can be either professional or personal. Always professional letterhead is more valued though. Personal letterhead would just be like a name, probably address, maybe email address if you don't have any official letterhead. And then a hand signature. And it's fine if someone's, you know, scanned a copy of their hand signature and saved it to the computer and they just copy and paste that. It just cannot be a type signature because anyone could have typed that. I can't stress these things enough. We've actually had medical schools reject letters from us that were missing these things. And so that's just really a shame after all the effort that goes into it. One of the great things if you work with us and you have us submit your letters is that we are able to actually be the intermediary and screen your letters for all these formatting things. However, it does take a lot of time. Even though the message your letter writers will receive in the future states all of this explicitly, as well as many reminders they receive, we still get letters all the time missing these things. And so remember, it's not us that are requiring it, it's the medical and dental schools. And so we don't want to jeopardize them just tossing your letter aside because it had incorrect formatting. I'm not even joking. We had a medical school once say they wouldn't accept a letter that wasn't dated within the past year. So please just give your letter writers a heads up, and then that'll streamline the process for all of us down the road. Okay, last quick note about section 3 here. Official transcripts. Please note that the UConn registrar is the only entity that can release your official transcript. We get emails every single year asking, oh, can you send my transcript to so-and-so? No, we can't. And so the good news is that UConn does use one of the allowable e-transcript services. It's called Parchment. And so you can actually just go into your student admin account and request your official transcript be sent to whichever application service you're applying to. And so you only have to send it once because again, it's the application service that then verifies your grades and calculates your GPA. And then they're in charge of shipping that data out to the individual schools you're applying to. Okay, we do recommend as well that if you are a current student, you wait to request that official transcript until your spring grades are posted because otherwise the schools might not have access to them. All right, we're going to jump now into a section about what our own processes here are for letter packets. And so for the 2022 cycle, our office will offer a letter packet, which will include an individualized non-evaluative cover letter. This is the official definition by the AAMC. The cover letter, by the way, will include a lot of your highlights as a candidate, anything that is really strong in your background and preparation, and especially unique things that set you apart from other applicants. When you go to submit your primary application, whichever application service you're using, you will have to formally put a request into that system for us to be able to upload your letter packet. This is an example for AMCAS, but all the systems look very similar. And so out of the 3 options that they give you, you will want to select the letter packet option. Okay. Now I'm probably proudest of this meme right here, so please. Erin, I would like to invite you to jump in now and talk a little bit about our process for the 2022 cycle.
Absolutely, Krista. As you've met our team at the beginning of this presentation, we have all been thinking really hard and working hard to figure out the best way we can support all of our growing number of applicants in the future, and especially in light of the pandemic. And so we are changing a little bit of our process this year from past letters, if you are accustomed to it. And what we're doing is we're actually giving more one-on-one time with you, the applicants, and our advising team. And so you've seen all the questions that have been coming in the chat about who to select, where to apply, what to do with experiences during a pandemic. And we will be changing our process a little bit so that we can better focus on that one-on-one advising time with all of our applicants. We'll talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of this, but what it means for you right now, in addition to one-on-one advising time, is that we are still requiring you to submit a health professions applicant portfolio. This is what we called the portal in past years. And Krista, I'm just going to jump a little into this. And what the health professions applicant portfolio is a set of questions that actually mimics what you'll see on your primaries and secondaries, in addition to some questions about competencies. And what this enables you to do is you will submit this to us, and by the time you are applying for your primaries, you will have almost all of your answers drafted. They might not be in perfect shape, but it will allow you to really have some solid answers. And then when you participate in that coaching session with us, the second bullet point here, we are going to walk through your portal and your portfolio answers with you, discuss them, and talk about things that might be missing, how to strengthen your candidacy, and to get all of your questions answered. And then the last part is we will continue to collect your individual letters of recommendation through our office. The major change here, I would say 2 of them. We are giving more time to our one-on-ones with you, which used to be 20 minutes, and it was very fast-paced, and poor Dr. Sanford had meeting after meeting after meeting, very fast-paced. And then the other part is we are switching from a composite letter model, which, as Krista noted, had an evaluative component. We would have to evaluate all of our students, which was both time intensive and focused on evaluation rather than maybe highlighting your strengths. And we are switching to a cover letter that will still be personalized and will still talk about you. And we are still doing all of our applicant support and collecting your letter packet for you. So again, we are very supportive in this process. We are committed to making you the strongest candidates, especially during a pandemic, but we are just switching our model from what was called a composite letter to a cover letter and letter packet.
Would you like to keep going for a bit? You're doing great.
I'll let you take over and I can jump in if need be, Krista, unless you need a break in your voice.
Okay then. Okay, so this is just a better illustration of how this will work. You're going to submit your applicant portfolio. We'll talk about timeline in a second. And then at that point, we will receive a notification and schedule you a time for your applicant coaching session. At some point, either in tandem with this or after, it's independent. You'll also be requesting and collecting your individual letters of recommendation through our electronic system. Down the road as well, you'll need to provide us with whatever your respective application IDs are. Okay, and once we have that information, there's another method by which you'll submit a notification to us, and then we'll begin compiling your letter packet. At that point, we'll also screen your individual letters of rec to make sure all of the formatting requirements are in check. Okay, so the basic timeline for this. This is greatly simplified compared to years past, which I'm very excited about. The electronic portfolio system for you to begin working on your questions and submit them is going to officially open on Monday, February 15th at 9 a.m. So you can't access it yet. We're going to give you a few days to just start thinking about some basic questions along the lines of your motivation for medical school, what you feel your personal competency strengths are, and so on. We will begin scheduling our applicant coaching sessions on Wednesday, February 24th. We are not going to indicate a hard deadline for doing any of this. In years past, we typically set a hard deadline of about March 1st, submit all your information. I found that we just got a slew of notifications, over 100 usually, the day before it was due. And so we want you to be able to submit this on a rolling basis whenever it's most convenient for you, whenever you really have enough time to put some deep and careful reflection into your responses, so that when you meet with us, we really can see you at your full potential. That said, you know, ideally you will have these questions submitted and everything in time for us to discuss and provide feedback on them before you submit your primary application. And so if you are planning on doing that, you know, at the beginning of the cycle, sometime in May or June, depending on your specific application service, you know, ideally you will be submitting your portfolio at some point throughout the spring semester.
Krista, can you just jump back one page so we can kind of revisit this? So the applicant portfolio session can really happen anytime when you're ready for it, but the sooner the better, just so that we can give you the feedback you need. And then the last piece, that when we compile and submit your letter packet, we can't actually do that until probably June when the system's open. So we're not telling you to wait until May to do it, because the sooner is the better, so that we can give you all the great feedback you need. But knowing that this is not something that you need to rush through, because we can't take any action on it until June. Is that correct, Krista?
Yes, thank you. And if you are an MD applicant, you know, recall that AMCAS is not going to be shipping your application out to the schools until the very last few days of June anyway. And even if we were to submit letters before then, they're effectively just sitting there. So every year we have applicants emailing saying, when are you going to submit? When are you going to submit? And in reality, even if we did submit, it would just be sitting there. Thank you for clarifying. So the bottom line, the moral of the story is don't procrastinate, however, but make sure to put your best detail and attention into your responses so we can provide the most helpful feedback. Okay, I had scheduled another Q&A break. I know we've been kind of taking questions throughout. Erin, is there a quick question or two, or do you think we should keep moving?
I don't think so. I mean, there was a question about when the system opens. It does open next Monday for both letters of recommendation and for you to start looking at the questions. You don't have to do them all in one sitting, and you can submit them whenever you're ready. And if you make a mistake and submit too soon, just let us know. We can release it back to you. And then, does the letter packet process also apply to dental schools? Yes, got that. And then, is the MCAT score sent at the time you submit your primary automatically?
So your MCAT score is essentially sent whenever you take it, whenever you have your scores.
And the final question from Jillian is that, so is this a system we submit the names of our letters of rec? It's a separate link, but same idea. It will be a separate link, and everything will be very clearly labeled on our website.
If you don't know what capybaras are, by the way, I encourage you to Google some photos because they're very majestic, very chill creatures. I get lots of calm just by looking at them. Okay, speaking of those two applications, that was a great transition. So this electronic system of questions you'll fill out, the way that you're going to be requesting your letters of recommendation, they will be through the Quest portal, which is through SurveyMonkey Apply. So even if you go to this link right now, though, recall it's not going to be there. You're not going to find anything. It will open on Monday the 15th. And so there are two applications you'll find. The first one is called the Health Professions Applicant Portfolio. This is where the bulk of the questions are that you'll answer. Okay, and then the second one is called the Health Professions Letter Packet. And so this is the application where you will be requesting electronically your letters, your individual letters of rec from your letter writers. This system works for UConn people and non-UConn people. So it's really convenient. We can just collect all of them in one very centralized place. Okay, so as I mentioned, when you are ready to submit your portfolio, you will be prompted to input your availability for the applicant coaching session. And then at the point after that, someone from our office will reach out to you with the scheduled date and time. This is just a brief overview of the main menu on that Health Professions applicant portfolio and the pages you'll be filling out. You'll see a couple of the pages are optional. The bulk of your time will likely be spent on the questions page. If we have time, maybe we'll show a couple examples. Okay, and this is the second application, the Health Professions Letter Packet. You will want to notify us when all of your individual letters of rec have been received. We do ask you to wait until all of them have been received, since we can't compile your letter packet and submit it until we have all of them. But when we receive that notification, that's also our cue to then review them and again, screen for any of those formatting concerns, in which case we just reach out to you and let you know. You might want to ask so-and-so to submit a revised copy to us. Okay. Erin, what do you think about, should we show a couple of the questions?
Yeah, I think we can show one or two, and then know that you can wait with bated breath for next Monday when we post the rest of them.
Okay. In fact, Erin, could you please maybe introduce a couple of the main questions on here?
Sure. The first question on here is about your motivation for pursuing medicine. And this is a really critical question that med schools and dental schools want to know that you have reflected on, and how your experiences so far have reinforced or changed your desire to pursue medicine or dental medicine or podiatry. And so this is almost setting you up for a great personal statement in the way that it is phrased. Another one is something we stress over and over. The second one, how has your plan of study and your coursework demonstrated depth, breadth, and rigor over your time there? And then I'll look at the fourth one and the fifth one. The fourth one is specifically about a service experience that has been meaningful for you and what you learned. And I think it was Dr. Sanford earlier who mentioned service orientation and how important that is. So this is giving you the opportunity to start considering which of those experiences have been most meaningful to you. And then finally, our fifth one is about what are some of the most essential experiences for your background and how impactful they were. And this is, I believe, almost exactly kind of covered in the primary applications, because they make you narrow it down to just a few essential experiences in there. So forcing you to actually start filtering what were those most critical experiences to you.
Thank you. And Dr. Abbott is always stressing the importance of the service orientation by dental schools as well. Just to point out on the competency-based page, this is where we'll have you do some really deep reflection on what your personal competencies are, identifying a few particular areas of strength. And then we do have some prompts on this page for each of the 15 core competencies in order to guide your thought process. Okay, so that's a small sampling of what's to come.
Someone asked in the questions as we're wrapping up, what should they tell letter writers as a due date? And does it depend on when you're applying in the cycle? And I would say, yes, it does depend on where you're applying, what programs you're applying, what types of programs. My advice would be, the earlier the better, but also recognizing the cycle of academics. And so asking a faculty member for a May 1st deadline is probably not feasible. we've revealed that we really can't even send anything or submit anything until to the application programs in terms of letter packets until June. So Krista, what would you suggest as a good deadline for students to give their recommenders?
That's actually exactly what I recommend, early June, because that still gives us some wiggle time if you're a meta applicant to then compile the letter packet, troubleshoot any of the formatting things, and get it submitted by the end of June. And before then, they're just going to be sitting there anyway. If you are a dental applicant, I would recommend a little bit earlier than that if possible, just again, because ADSAS moves very quickly in the verification process. So there's no hard deadline per se. It does depend a bit on where you're applying to, but those are some general guidelines to consider.
The other thing that I would mention, which we also highlight in our letters of recommendation session, is go ahead and set the seed now, ask them now. It seems far away, but talk to your recommenders now and kind of get confirmation that they're willing to do it. And then once you've done that, you can go ahead and follow up with them on the application side of things.
Okay, we're in the home stretch now. I realize we're going to go a tiny bit over. If you need to leave, that's fine. You can watch the recording afterwards. We thank you for joining us. So just a few quick words to wrap this up. What happens after all of this happens? So first of all, interviews. And so be aware that we will be offering interviewing workshops in collaboration with the CCD, typically a bit later in the summer. At this point, that's not anything you're probably thinking of anyway. And depending when you submit your primary application and then in turn any secondary applications, the earliest you might be hearing back about some interviews is August, late summer. And then a lot of the schools do offer interviews right through the end of February. I was emailing an applicant yesterday who just heard back about an interview yesterday from an MD program. So that's very typical. And unfortunately, it is a bit of a waiting game. It's a very frustrating waiting game. They leave you on the edge of your seat. After February is when a lot of programs do evaluate kind of where they stand in terms of numbers and spots they've already offered. And if they still have spots remaining, they might revisit their alternate lists and extend more offers. Okay, in terms of medical school interviews, just one key trivia piece for today. There's really two main types of interviews. Your good old traditional interview that's either one-on-one or in a group with faculty or current students, as well as something called a multiple mini interview. It's kind of like moving around to different stations, and you might be at each station for only 5 minutes, and you're presented with some kind of scenario to which you have to respond. And so they really are looking to test your critical thinking skills, and oftentimes they're really ethics-based dilemmas. So not a right or wrong per se, but they want to get insight into your thinking process. To highlight the CCD, so one thing a lot of applicants don't realize is that the CCD actually offers personal statement review. That's pretty darn cool. So you can go to both the W Center and the CCD. You can set up an appointment on their website just for dedicated personal statement review. If you do want to try looking for any alumni out there who are maybe physicians or dentists, also check out their Husky Mentor Network, because this is a database the CCD maintains of UConn alumni who have voluntarily put themselves out there to be contacted by undergrads or other alumni who want to learn more about their professions. So definitely check that out. I mentioned the interviews, and then you can also down the road schedule a 45-minute mock interview with the CCD, and we have worked with them to create lists of custom health professional school interview type questions. Okay, now one important thing, you're going to hear this much later on, but there's such a thing as traffic rules. And so it's basically all the etiquette and protocol that have to do with either receiving multiple acceptances and or when you actually commit to a program. So just something not important for today, but just something to be aware of is that you will want to familiarize yourself with whatever those traffic rules are for your relevant application service. You might hear down the road something about letters of update or letters of intent. This is something we're happy to talk through with you down the road. Just one key thing to note is that not all programs want them. Some programs actually shy away from them, and by submitting something that they're not asking for, sometimes that can reflect negatively on you. So just be aware though, this is the kind of thing we're always happy to talk over with you, dialogue, counsel, whether you're a current student or alumni. And also if you want to discuss what to do during a potential growth year, for example. Yes, and scribing, medical scribing has exploded in popularity. It's a great growth year type activity to really gain more direct patient care experience. Okay, one last main point. So this is just for your reference. These were the number of applicants we worked with last cycle. As you can see, the majority of them were applying to MD programs. Now, some of these numbers, we did have applicants who were applying to both MD and DO programs. So there is a little bit of overlap in the AMCAS and AACOMAS numbers. We typically, every cycle, average about 35 to 50 dental applicants as well. And then smaller numbers of the other services. It's really only people who have a permanent address in Texas or who are from Texas apply there because they are very in-state heavy. They really prioritize their in-state residents. Okay, and then we generally do average anywhere from 1 to 3 optometry applicants. I haven't seen a podiatry applicant in a couple years. So these are all some things. We've also, one of those updates on our website that I mentioned is that we added a whole page detailing our acceptance and matriculant data. So you can check that out at this link. You can see a list of the programs our students were accepted to in the most recently available data and see where our top destinations were for both MD, DO, and dental programs. So please check that out. Okay, this is kind of weird to ask this when I can't see everyone's faces in a big room. However, just think in your head, try to guess what this stack of folders represents. Give you 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so this was not last year because we switched to a completely electronic model, but 2 years ago, this was the number of applicants who thought they were applying as part of the 2020 cycle, and at some point over the summer, over the application process, decided that they wanted to defer and essentially take a little more time. And it could be for a variety of reasons. So I just want to emphasize the fact that, you know, again, we want you to apply when you feel ready. And it's probably not in your best interest to submit an application if you feel you really haven't covered all those areas and cultivated all those experiences we talked about in the holistic admissions. I did eat that banana, by the way. So just a really key point, a big request from us that if you are going to be working with us, and then if at any point in the cycle you decide you do want to defer and just put off your application plans, that's completely fine. We understand, we support you. Just please let us know though, because we just don't want to continue working on things if you're not going to apply. And then we'll work with you though to pick up wherever we left off this cycle as you move on to the future. All right, this is the very last slide. Congratulations, you've made it through. Thank you very much for sticking with us here. I hope that wasn't too much. Again, you will have access to all these slides in the recording as well. Erin and others, what else would you like to add at the end here?
I just want to add 2 things. One, well, 3. The first is thank you, Krista. Krista is such a wealth of knowledge and has put so much effort into this and is such a tremendous support for our office. So please give a virtual clap to Krista. The second thing I wanted to mention is that reach out to us with any questions in the meanwhile. No question is too small. No question is too silly. Our inbox is a great place to get, you know, quick questions answered. And if we can't answer it, we're happy to schedule a short advising time with you. And we are so excited to actually get to work with you one-on-one and talk through this process with you. And the last thing I wanted to add was we didn't get to some questions, but the pandemic has had a huge impact on this whole process. And schools are going to realize that they're going to have to change the way they look at students because not everybody can be in a doctor's office getting shadowing hours, not right now. Direct clinical experience is so hard right now. And so we're prepared to work with you to talk through your experiences. And what I've really been stressing in meetings with students is quality over quantity. Try to dig into the experiences you have right now and be reflective about them so that when you're talking about those experiences in your application, it will be reflected and the schools will see that. So it is such a hard time right now for everybody, and medical schools are going to, they kind of have to change their expectations of what types of experiences students will get. And so we're happy to help you through this journey, to talk through this, to talk about work, shadowing, those types of experiences. Dr. Sanford, do you want to jump in?
Just a couple of things I would highlight. And our goal is to get you started working on this essentially now. So by the time you get into May, June, you've really got it down on paper for the most part, or at least you've got a good working draft in your head that you're going to be able to move ahead pretty quickly and get things done and in. Now, I tend to think of the sort of draft of the primary as a May activity. No real rush. I mean, you're involved in finishing your classes early May. You're taking finals, early middle of May. So, wait until you're pretty much done with that. Then go ahead and download the basic primary application. You will already have drafts for, the 15 boxes and the other things that those require. So again, we just want you to sort of start to get some stuff down on paper. So you're not procrastinating, you're not putting it off. When it does become available, you're able to move ahead to it pretty quickly. And we like folks to try to submit their primary in June. You don't have to be in the first hour of the first day. As long as you're within that first couple of weeks. I mean, it's going to go out with the first batch of files that do get verified. So you don't drive yourself nuts about, whether it's in this particular day or that day. I mean, just shoot for, June if you can. As noted, folks do often want to get their primary in, so it's verified, and it's a sort of way to speed up the application process for you. Many students do that before they get their MCAT back, sometimes before they even take the MCAT. So it's important to be taking practice tests as a gauge for how you're likely going to do. If you're pretty confident about that, then it's fine to move forward with submission of the primary. If you really are very, worried about that and doubtful about how performance is going to go with that, I mean, then you want to sort of wait a little bit till you have a little better read of whether you should be proceeding with the application for the year. June, I typically say is the month to send in the primary if you can. I mean, there are circumstances where you just don't know. You don't know how you're going to how you're going to be prepared to sit for the MCAT if you're going to do it in early July, middle of July, late July. So you may want to hold off on it a bit. But for most everybody that certainly got the MCAT done and in by May, there's no reason why you can't be ready to go to submit your primary in June. And even if, again, you're taking the test in June, as long as you've taken practice tests and you're pretty confident about that, sort of move ahead, because that can save about 4 weeks of processing time often for a student. In July, if you're on that pace, July is going to be your secondary application sort of month. And our overall goal is to have all of our students have a complete application into all schools no later than the end of August. It does start to get late at the medical schools after that date. Again, if you're in earlier and you can complete it by the mid to end of July, I mean, you can't really get much earlier than that. So again, the goal of the office is to not have anything at our end holding you up to complete an application. We do want to work with you very carefully through the entries you make in the portal statement, coach through with your responses, and to present the best overall application you can in terms of your primary, in terms of your secondary, and the letter package that we'll be putting together for you. So there's some little details along the way about sort of accelerating things that folks talked about. One thing is, indeed, often it's a good idea to get your transcripts actually submitted before you click to submit your primary. But make sure the grades are already reported in for the end of the semester. So if you have your transcripts sitting and waiting there, when your file gets pulled up by one of the checkers at the application service, if not all the transcripts are there, it's going to get, moved on the list and may not come back for a little while. If you've taken classes at other schools, make sure you submit an original transcript from each school. Don't assume because it got transferred over, credit got transferred over to your program here at Connecticut, all that shows up on your transcript is a T, and they have to have the actual grade from the original transcript. So that is one of the things that typically ties people up and delays applications. The other thing Krista highlighted is try to do your secondaries within a couple of weeks. You can access the list, the ones from the previous year, and most of them remain pretty much the same year to year. But these are sort of tips to accelerate a little bit completion of the application. Again, our goal is to have you sort of in and done with everything, if not by the end of July, by the end of August. So again, thanks to everybody, and thanks to Krista and everyone in the office.
Thanks to everybody for being here. Just want to say this is a very long and stressful process, but we're here to help make it easier and to break things up for you. So please reach out to us, and we look forward to meeting all of you throughout the semester.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in tonight.